The ice mountain rocked gradually to and fro, raising a considerable swell on the sea, which, all around, was covered with the foam caused by this tremendous commotion. In a few minutes several rents took place, sounding like the reports of great guns. Rotten as it was, the berg could not stand the shock of its changing of position, for it had turned fairly upside down. Crack after crack took place, with deafening reports. Lumps of all sizes fell from its sides. There was a roar, long continued like thunder. A moment after, the whole berg sank down in ruins, and, with a mighty crash, fell flat upon the sea. The Hope was beyond the reach of danger, but she rose and sank on the swell caused by the ruin of this berg, for some time after. It was on the afternoon of the same day that the brig received her first really severe nip from the ice. She had got deep into the pack, and was surrounded on all sides by large bergs, some of these being high like the one that has just been described, others low and flat, but of great extent. One, not far off, was 2 miles long, and its glittering walls rose about 15 feet above the sea. The sky was brighter than usual at the time, and this was owing to one of those strange appearances which one sees of in the Arctic regions than in any other part of the world. The sun shone with unclouded splendor, and around it were 3 mock suns, almost half as bright as the sun itself, one on each side and one directly above it. Learned men call these bright spots perihelia. Sailors call them sun dogs. They were connected together with a ring of light which entirely encircled the sun, but the lower edge of it was partly lost on the horizon. Although this was the first time that these mock suns had been seen by Gregory and some others of the crew of the Hope, little attention was paid to them at the time, because of dangerous positions into which the brig had been forced. The pack had again closed all around her, obliging her to take shelter in the lee of a small berg, which, from its shape, did not seem likely to be a dangerous protector. There was a small bay in the berg. Into this the brig was warped, and for some time she lay safely here. It was just large enough to hold her, and a tongue of ice projecting from the foot of it kept off the pressure of the sea ice. Nevertheless, a look of anxiety rested on the captain's face after the ice anchors had been made fast. "You don't seem to like our position, captain," said young Gregory, who had been watching the doings of the men and now and then lent them a hand. "I don't, Tom. The pack is closing tight up, and this berg may prove an enemy instead of a friend, if it forces into our harbour here. Let us hear what our mate thinks of it. What say you, Mr Mansell? Shall we hold on here, or warp out and take our chances in the pack?" "Better hold on, sir," answered the mate gravely. "The pack is beginning to grind. We should get a tight embrace, I fear, if we went out. Here we may do well enough, but everything depends on that tongue." He looked as he spoke towards the point of ice which extended in front of the brig's stern, and guarded the harbour from the outer ice in that direction. The tongue was not a large one, and it was doubtful whether it could stand the pressure that was increasing every minute. The pack was indeed beginning to grind, as the mate had said, for, while we were looking at it, the edges of 2 floes came together with a crash about 50 yards from the berg. They ground together for a moment with a harsh, growling sound, and then the 2 edges were suddenly forced up to a height of about 15 or 20 feet. Next moment they fell on the closed-up ice, and lay there in a mound, or hummock, of broken masses. "That's how a hummock is formed, Dr. Gregory," said Mr Dicey, looking uncommonly wise. "You'll see more things here in 5 minutes, by means of your own eyes, than ye can learn from books in a year. There's nothing like seeing. Seeing is believing, you know. I wouldn't give an ounce of experience for a ton of hearsay." "Come on, Mr Dicey, don't run down book learning," said Gregory. "If a man only knew about things he had seen, he would know very little." Before the second mate could reply, The captain shouted to the men, "Bear a hand with the ice poles." The whole crew answered to the call, and each man, seizing a long pole, stood ready for action. The tongue to which I have referred more than once had broken off, and the ice was rushing in. The bay was full in a minute, and although the men used their ice poles actively, and worked with a will, they could not shove the pieces past them. The Hope was driven bow on to the berg. Then there was a strain, a terrible creaking and groaning of the timbers, as if the good little vessel were complaining of the pressure. All at once there was a loud crack. The bow of the brig lifted a little, and she was forced violently up the sloping side of the berg. Twice this happened, and then she remained stationary, high and dry, out of the water. CHAPTER 5.